Member for Saanich North and Islands.
Mr. Speaker, over the last few weeks, this BC NDP government's failed to convince British Columbians that the museum project is the noble venture that they claim it to be. We know that those who control the information, control the storytelling, control the narratives. Residential and day schools and museums were all tools used by Crown governments to dominate and subordinate Indigenous people. The goal expressed by the architects of the Indian Act a century ago was to assimilate Indigenous people and annihilate our cultures. Mr. Speaker, fast forward today, and all the MLAs in this chamber received a desperate letter from the Gwa'sala Nakwaxda'xw Council. They're moving forward under the federal legislation to take back control and jurisdiction over their children and families based on their own cultural laws. They've outlined horrific abuses at the hands of the Ministry of Children and Family Development. Our relatives have asked for access to their files. They have stated clearly that these are their files about their children and families. Their cultural laws require them to carefully research their history of each member, to do namings and other cultural ceremonies. And now the ministry has important parts of these histories that they will not share with them. They also need the files to prepare their costing models and develop their programs and services in a culturally based way and to address past gaps and problems. How can anyone build better programs without access to past files and data? My question is to the Premier. He positions himself as a warrior of reconciliation. So why is he allowing his government to continue with this data colonialism?
Minister of Children and Family Development.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I do want to acknowledge that for far too long, the system of government in British Columbia has been over-involved in the lives of Indigenous children and youth and families. And Indigenous children and youth have been over-represented in the child welfare system. Our government is committed to reconciliation, and in my ministry we are absolutely committed to changing that. We know the harm that has caused for Indigenous children, youth and families for generations. It's very important that we change the whole of the system. We are absolutely committed to working with nations to exercise their inherent jurisdiction. Honourable Speaker, I've recently been visiting nations who are at different stages in exercising their inherent jurisdiction. We were at coordination tables with them and with the Government of Canada, and we're working with them and following their path and following their timelines as well. And we're doing the same with Gwa'sala nakwaxda'xw as well, Honourable Speaker. I actually had very senior staff in the community all day on Monday of this week, and we're committed to a new way of working together, and we have the agreement of the community to continue working together to support them in how they want to exercise their inherent jurisdiction. There's a lot more work to do, and we are absolutely committed to doing it and doing it in partnership.
Member for Saanich North and Islands, supplemental.
Well, Mr. Speaker, honestly, that response is terrible. The reality of it is that this nation has been trying to get access to files, historical files, about the mistreatment of their members from the Ministry of Children and Family Development, and they have been blocked by this government. The exchange of letters between the nation and this BC NDP government are painful. They're painful to read. The stories of terrible abuses at the hands of that ministry, they're difficult to comprehend, Mr. Speaker. The nation was told by that, quote, the Deputy Director of Child Welfare has communicated his decision to not disclose complete records, end quote. That's what the nation's been told. The Gwa'sala nakwaxda'xw responded saying that the provincial crown continues to apply a specifically narrow interpretation of the law that goes against the commitment from the Minister of Children and Family Development. October 21st, 2021. October 20th, 2021, the minister made a commitment. And the minister's Deputy Minister, Alison Bond, also made a commitment, directly in contravening their own commitments to this nation. The MCFD and this BC NDP government have a culture of withholding, Mr. Speaker. Read the news today. See another story of where MCFD is withholding money from an Indigenous family looking after their grandchildren. They withhold children until they determine whether the Indigenous mother is capable based on their own standards. And the Premier's legacy of this museum is actually more of the same. They claim to be different, but this is more of the same behavior from this government. This is not a legal or privacy issue that I'm talking about today, Mr. Speaker. The current legislation allows provincial directors to provide information to First Nations. This can't be a privacy issue because this is about returning information about First Nations back to First Nations. Mr. Speaker, my question is again to the Premier, and I hope he will stand up and respond. Is he just going to stand by and allow his government to continue to withhold vital information from Indigenous nations who are rightfully taking back jurisdiction over their child welfare?
Premier.
I thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I thank the member for his passion about this issue. He will know that this government has been transformative when it comes to working with Indigenous peoples. Over the past 5 years, we've brought forward landmark legislation supported by all members of this House with respect to the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. We've been working through the Ministry of Children and Family Development to right the wrongs that he talks about, the historic wrongs. And if there are issues today that require a more in-depth discussion, I'm quite prepared to have that with the member. But the challenges that Indigenous peoples face in this province are not something that happened yesterday. It's been going on since the expansion of Europe and colonization came to this great province that we call home, and we share with Indigenous peoples, 204 Indigenous distinct nations, as the member for Langara said in his statement today. I appreciate the passion of the member. I'm happy to sit down with him and look into the details that he's raised in the House today. But let's leave the public with a sense that they can have comfort that all of the people in this House, 87 members, are committed to redressing the wrongs of the past, and we do that by taking steps forward. Will we stumble? Will we make mistakes? Yes, we will. But we should be doing it together in a spirit of cooperation and collaboration. If we can't cooperate and collaborate here, it's little wonder that Indigenous peoples don't support us as we go into their communities.